It is Thursday on Daily Delivery. I am Michael Rand. Happy to be back for another day. Hope everybody's having a great day out there today. Tremendous show coming up. Velle E. Neal III from the Star Tribune joins me for the Daily Delivery debate. 3 big subjects today. 1, are the Gophers men's basketball team even going to make the Big Ten tournament? We were talking about, hey, what a great story they are. Just a couple weeks ago, they beat, the 2 teams in LA. They were 6-3 in their last 9 Big Ten games. Then all of a sudden they come home. You're like, wow, Penn State and Northwestern, they could beat those 2 teams. Instead, they lose to both those teams. They are now 6-11 in the conference, in danger of missing even the conference tournament. So Lavelle and I will get into that. We will talk about Sam Darnold, the likelihood the Vikings will use the franchise tag on Sam Darnold, and we will talk about the Twins' ownership situation, what the impact of the news of Justin Ishbia leaving the race has to do with the Twins right now. Will they find an owner? Who will they identify? Many billionaires in the sea, all that sort of stuff. So Lavelle and I will get into all those things in a little bit. Some Vikings thoughts at the end of the show. Players love the Vikings. The players who play for the Vikings love the Vikings. The NFL report cards are out. Good news for the Vikings. Bad news for some other teams. We'll get into that as well at the end of the show. A Timberwolves draft thought here in just a minute. First, though, what I miss. Let's start with the Gophers women's basketball team. Had Kent Youngblood on last week to kind of set up what's at stake over the final 3 games of the season, and 3 Big Ten regular season games, I guess, at that point. And they needed at that point to win at Purdue. We knew that, and they did that. They accomplished that last week. And he said, you know what? Once you beat Purdue, if you beat Purdue, then you've got a whole week to prepare for Washington, and that's a big, big game. Washington, similar to the Gophers in the standings, but a little bit further down in the standings, but would be a quality win. And that game arrived. It came Wednesday night at Williams Arena. If the Gophers were to win that game, you were like, I like their NCAA tournament chances. A loss, and then you look at it and you say, man, they still got work to do. Got off to a good start last night. Things were looking good, at least on the scoreboard. They took an early lead. Washington, however, shot the lights out. Some of that had to do with the Gophers' defensive effort. It sure sounded like, listening to post-game thoughts from head coach Don Plitzowite, lacked some of the intensity required in a big game. Washington almost made 3 out of every 4 shots over the last 3 periods of that game, the second, third, and fourth quarter. Almost 3/4 of their shots. You are not going to win a lot of games when that is the case. When your opponent does that, they lose 72-62, and now the NCAA tournament projections are very precarious because now you're tied with Washington, 12th place in the Big Ten. Tons of Big Ten teams are going to get in. The problem with the Gophers is they don't really have a lot of impressive wins. You're looking at the net ratings, which aren't updated yet. They were 32nd in the net ratings, which is pretty good. 32nd in the net ratings going into Wednesday night's game against Washington. But they're 0-5 against Quad 1 teams, so no great wins this season. They were 2-3 against Quad 2 teams. Now that's going to be 2-4 because Washington going into the game was 44th. And in order to get a quad, in order to be a Quad 1 team in a home game, you have to beat a top 30 team. So that was a Quad 2 game. They lost that. So now 0-5 against Quad 1 teams, 2-4 against Quad 2 teams. And those are largely the teams that are going to be in the NCAA tournament. Those are the best of the best. Those are the teams that are going to be, playing in March for the championship, for the chance to win a championship. Gophers are 18-0 combined against Quad 3 and Quad 4, which includes 15-0 against Quad 4. That is a lot of games against inferior opponents. Nobody else in the top, nobody else above them has played more Quad 4 games than the Gophers. In fact, nobody has played as many. The most Quad 4 games of any team above them is 13, and that's just one. That's LSU, and they're 10th. They are very safe. They've got 6 Quad 1 wins. So just speaking out loud here, they don't have any great wins, and they have a lot of kind of cupcake wins on their resumes. So you're sitting there thinking, okay, probably some work left to do for them. 8-9 in the Big Ten right now. Just one more conference game left. That is Saturday at Michigan State. Now, that would certainly qualify as a very good win. Michigan State 21st in the net right now. That would be easily a quad one win. But with the way the Gophers are going right now, they started 4-1 in conference play. So they're 8-9 right now. That means they're 3-8 4-8 in their last 12 conference games. That's not the direction you want to be headed towards the postseason. So a chance against Michigan State, then you've got the Big Ten tournament. If you don't beat Michigan State, you probably got to go on some kind of tournament run or at least win one game in the conference tournament to feel like you're putting yourselves in position. So precarious for the Gophers. This once looked very solid, now precarious. An opportunity missed on Wednesday night against Washington. Now, I mentioned at the jump that I have a Timberwolves draft thought. And you're like, why do you have a Timberwolves draft thought? It's end of February. Draft is 4 months away. Timberwolves are battling for a playoff spot. They've got the Lakers tonight. They've got Utah tomorrow. Maybe the Utah game tomorrow got me thinking about the draft. They obviously owe the Jazz their 2025 first-round pick, part of that Rudy Gobert trade still, so that's going out to Utah. However, it's a little bit flying under the radar, but Detroit, the Detroit Pistons, the Timberwolves have the Pistons' 2025 first-round pick as part of the Karl Anthony Towns trade with the Knicks. The Knicks had that as part of the package, so they get that pick. It's top 13 protected, and I think when the trade was made, everybody looked at it and was like, the Pistons are terrible. That pick will never convey because it goes if it doesn't convey this season, if the Pistons, finish as one of the 13 worst teams, finish in the lottery, and it doesn't go to the Wolves, I think it's top 11 protected in 2026, top 9 protected in 2027. If it doesn't get to the Wolves by that point, it just becomes a 2027 second round pick. So everybody looked at it and was like, oh man, this is ostensibly a 2027 second round pick because the Pistons are terrible. They're never going to be good. Well, guess what? The Pistons are on an 8-game winning streak right now. The Pistons are 33-26. The Pistons have a better record than the Timberwolves right now. So as of right now, the pick would convey to the Wolves. The Wolves would be getting the number 20 pick in the NBA draft. That's where Detroit is in the draft order right now. The pick that's going to Utah from the Wolves right now is the 18th pick because the Wolves are one game worse than Detroit. Now, the Wolves have an easy schedule down the stretch. We don't know how Detroit is going to finish up, but Detroit is in very solid playoff spot in the East. They're one of 6 teams that is projected to finish over 500. Basically, they're projected to finish with 45 wins by Basketball Reference. The 7th place team is projected to finish with 40. So they are pretty well clear of having to go into the play-in round. So if they make the playoffs, if they're one of the top 6 teams, which they look like they will be at this point, they will not be in the lottery, obviously. That pick will convey to the Wolves. So if you were worried about the Wolves not having any sort of draft capital next season, if you're worried about that Gobert pick is going to Utah forever, things like that, yeah, kind of is. You got problems with that. I get it. But they're going to get a pick next year, almost certainly. They're going to get a pick next year, and it might even be better than the pick they're giving up to Utah. So maybe, just maybe, there's hope. Whether they want to use that on their own player, whether they want to use that as a trade chip, they can do that, things like that, because they're already giving up this pick. You've got options now. You've got optionality with what you're going to do, so you've got some potential there with that pick. So interestingly enough, that's where they're at with that pick from Detroit. Detroit, you want to root for Detroit to be good this season. They're 33-26 right now. A surprising team in the NBA. They were kind of like middling for a while. You're like, look at Detroit. Maybe this is going to happen. But now 8 wins in a row, blasted the Celtics by 20 last night. They are on a heater. They are looking like a playoff team in the East, and that is good for the Wolves in the West. It is daily delivery debate time with Star Tribune columnist Velle E. Neal III. Velle, how you doing?
Doing good. Good to see you.
Good to see you as well. Last week, we were in kind of that space where nothing was happening, no games. A lot has happened since then, Velle, and I think there's some pertinent stuff to get to in a lot of different spaces. So I want to engage you. Number one, we learned a few days ago that Justin Ishbia, the only known, at least publicly known, publicized, known interested billionaire in the Twins, is no longer in that conversation. He's going to increase his stake in the White Sox, reportedly. What does that news mean to the sale of the Twins in your estimation?
I mean, I think these things happen when someone expressed interest, and even though if they were interested, we don't know how interested they were. So that has to be taken into consideration. I know I've got some friends who think like the sky is falling and this thing is a disaster. And I said, well, there was never a deal put together to fall apart. They're like, well, the Twin sale fell apart. I said, no, it's not falling apart. We still don't know the entire group of people who are interested in this team. This country's got a lot of billionaires, yes, and a lot of sports fans are billionaires. So I still think there's a chance the team's going to be sold. I had a friend of mine also point out, he's like, I saw this coming a month ago. I said, why would you say that? He said, well, the Ishbias already have businesses in Chicago. They're entrenched there, and they own part of the White Sox. If you have a chance to own the White Sox, why wouldn't you just get involved in buying the White Sox and the Minnesota Twins? You know, they're already minority owners. They've got no go-ahead to buy out other minority owners. And Jerry Reinsdorf is ready to sell, apparently. He had told his family previously that if something happened to him, to keep the Bulls and sell the White Sox. So it's like, to me, he's ready to sell. And the Ishbias where they're already entrenched, already know the landscape, already know how the politics work there, can just eventually become owners of the Chicago White Sox. This is not the end of the world for the Twins. Maybe they won't have someone identified by opening day. I'm still getting indications that there's still multiple people interested in this franchise. So are they interested in the number that the Twins want to sell? I am not sure yet. I think that's gotten interesting because all of a sudden we had a couple stories pop open here in recent days. Well, the Twins could be pulled off the market. Well, to me, that's just posturing, trying to get the number as high as possible, right. Threatening to take the team off the market to see if someone will throw in a couple more $100 million into the pot here. So, which I think it could be very possible here. So, just sit back. These things are never a smooth process, and it's just like it takes time. It's like, when you're buying a house, it takes several weeks to close a deal and move in, and when you're trying to sell $1 billion asset, it's going to take a little bit longer. So just be patient.
Nobody wants to be patient these days, Lavelle, which is part of the problem. I agree with you on this one. We're not going to have too much of a debate. I don't think the sky is falling. I do think there are certainly other interested parties. And your point about the billionaires out there, I wrote about that earlier this week. I looked it up, Forbes keeps track. Back when Carl Pohlad bought the team in 1984, different era. Baseball team didn't require you to be a billionaire back then, but in the United States, there were 12 billionaires in 1984. Now there's 800. Worldwide, there's 2,700 billionaires right now. And you're right. A lot of them sports fans. A lot of them probably say, hey, this might be an investment we want to get into. Less from a business standpoint, more from a, hey, this will be a cool new toy kind of standpoint, although they would probably still run it generally like a business. You don't want the asset to completely get away from you. But I think the one negative of this is that the White Sox and Twins kind of went on the market roughly the same time, or, Chicago was maybe a few weeks after the Twins. And that even with the connection that Ishbia has to the White Sox, that someone looked at both of these things and said, I'd rather do this, not that. Maybe that's bad luck for the Twins or just their perspective, but that doesn't necessarily bode well for, someone who probably kicked the tires on both and decided to go with the White Sox.
Oh, yeah. I mean, you could look at it that way. I just think it's a proximity thing that just makes it easier. And, Reinsdorf can vouch for them as minority holders of the White Sox. And, they're Big Ten guys. Maybe that fuel part of their interest in the Twins, because it's kind of a Big Ten state as well. But they decided to go after the big dog. And I was surprised to read that the White Sox are only valued at $1.9 billion. And that's a couple $100 million more than what the Twins are reportedly seeking. I found that interesting. And if I had a choice between the Twins for 1.7 and the White Sox for 1.9, I think I'd lean White Sox, but that's not much of a slam dunk. The Twins have a great stadium. They got a lease situation that's favorable and could be extended to 2059. Their roster is ready to win. They've got a good farm system. The White Sox are coming off a horrible season one of the worst in baseball history, if not the worst. Their stadium is bland, and Reinsdorfer is making noises about wanting a new stadium before all this mess happened. But it is Chicago, and it is like the third largest market in America. And there's something to be said about having a huge asset like that in one of the nation's larger markets. So I think there's pros and cons to both. But Twins to me is not a bad purchase if you're a billionaire and don't care where what part of the country you're buying into.
Indeed. I think it's the long story short is I don't think this is sky is falling. I do think, though, it will require a little bit more patience on the part of Twins fans who are probably eager to move on from all of this. Velle E. Neal, question number 2 for you. We've talked about the Gophers men's basketball team a few times already in this segment this year. It seems like something new. There's a twist every time we do. The sky is falling, or man, how are they winning? Or now the sky is falling again after 2 bad home losses to Penn State and Northwestern. Lavelle, are they even going to make the Big Ten tournament now? We thought that was a slam dunk like a week ago.
Yeah, first I want to say I'm extremely disappointed in Ben Johnson. After I showed him support in the paper, the Gophers go out and throw out 2 clunkers at home.
At home.
To 2 teams they should beat, Northwestern and
Penn State.
Penn State. Good grief. I didn't say it was okay to excel. I just said if you just destroyed the momentum. Were those imposters playing on the West Coast? UCLA, USC. Well, I'm just baffled by all this, how this has transpired.
They only led for like 4 minutes in those LA games. I think maybe we got a little too excited over 2 improbable comeback wins. But yes, go on. But
that suggested they had the mentality and the toughness and the grit to kind of win these battles. And we didn't see that against Penn State, Northwestern, for goodness sakes. I had a letter
went to their heads.
I had a letter waiting for me at the office 2 days ago on a Monday,
handwritten,
complaining about my column.
Oh no!
And for someone from North Dakota, and I'm like, he must have wrote that like seconds after reading the story. For him to get to the office and be waiting for me on Monday.
That's pretty good. Yeah, I'm glad the Postal Service. That's more of an infomercial for the Postal Service than anything else. That's pretty good. Yeah,
exactly. Well, that'll help the Postal Service survive.
Hope so. Yeah,
but no, it's going to be difficult. It's going to be incredibly difficult. And right now, you can't expect anything out of the Gophers. You can't chalk up victories to the Gophers now the rest of the way here because of what transpired against Penn State and Northwestern. And, they've got the Gophers finish up with who? They've got
Nebraska, Wisconsin, and Rutgers.
Nebraska that's a big game now. The Nebraska game is huge, and that's up at Lincoln. And up at Lincoln, that's a massive game. Then you've got Wisconsin, who's a very good team, even though it's at
that one's here, which has been a negative this year, but yeah.
Yeah, if it's even despite it being at the barn, that's just going to be a tough out for the Badgers. Going to be a tough out. So I don't have optimism there. And they finish up against Rutgers. The Rutgers just got the best player back. They're playing a little bit better, but these schedules. I mean, Rutgers before they play Minnesota, they have to play Michigan and Purdue. It's probably the last 2 teams you want to face this late in the season. So there's a chance they could be wounded by the time the Gophers get them in the season finale, regular season finale. Nebraska plays the Gophers. After that, they have Ohio State and they have Iowa. Those are winnable games for that grouping of teams. As the Gophers are in that group with Iowa, Nebraska, Rutgers, and USC and whatever. And then Rutgers has – no, that's not right. Someone's playing Ohio State, Oregon, Washington, and it's USC. Okay. Ohio State, Oregon, Washington, and UCLA. I don't know why they have 4 games. They play tonight, Wednesday night. Okay. They can have a say-so on all this too. So expecting the Gophers to win out is just unrealistic. So you're asking me, I don't think they're going to make the tournament. Do I still think Ben Johnson should be back? Yes, I do.
Wow. Okay.
I can't just jump off the bandwagon now after I support
him. That's what a columnist does. You can do whatever you want.
No, I'm taking a stand and I'm sticking with it here.
Okay.
The last 2 games have been pretty crummy.
Yes.
just if they could win just one of these two games, they'll help mitigate the disastrous finish a little bit. But they need to sweep to have a chance. But I don't know if they're capable of sweeping if they can't take care of business at home like they couldn't last week.
Actually, this is an adjacent discussion, but a lot of people are upset that 3 teams miss the Big Ten tournament now in this realigned, 18-team Big Ten. I actually don't mind it. I think it's kind of fine. I'm not opposed to that at all.
You got to have standards. I mean, how many brackets you're going to have? That bracket's pretty big if you try to make an 18-team bracket to pare down here. So I don't mind the 14 team thing at all. And who wants to see the bottom 4 teams in the conference tournament anyway? So, take care of business during the regular season. And if the Gophers don't make the Big Ten tournament, they reap what they sow, and this is on them.
Yes, agreed with that. Lavelle, last thing, again, something we've talked about plenty, heading towards a resolution. We've got to be at a resolution point pretty soon because the deadline for the Vikings to put a franchise tag on Sam Darnold or any player, you can only use one during the offseason. That's Tuesday. It's coming up. It's very soon. Are they going to do it? Do they franchise tag Sam Darnold?
I don't think so, but it's a much closer decision than you think. I think when you have a general manager in Kwesi Adolfo-Mensah, who is a former commodities trader, he understands value and assets and how to move them and how to take advantage of having one. And Sam Darnold can be a trading chip. You look at his numbers. He threw for 4,300 yards last year.
Yes.
The last 2 games were disastrous. But you look at the entire body of work. It's a heck of a year. 25 touchdowns and
35 touchdowns.
35 touchdowns, 12 picks.
Yeah.
You would take that. You would take 4,300 yards from your quarterback every year.
Yes.
I know everybody's on him for holding on to the ball in the 2 losses too long, but there were protection issues as well. So,
yes.
And, that's why interior offensive line is considered a key focus for the Vikings this offseason. So if he had better protection, maybe he would have been encouraged to get rid of the ball quicker. So I still think Sam's an asset. He could start for a number of teams in this league. I'm thinking of New Orleans off the top of my head. I'm thinking the Raiders were off the top of my head. Maybe the Giants, but I don't think the Giants would bring him back to New York where he floundered for the Jets.
Steelers are a good option too.
Steelers is a possibility too. And so here's the thing though. The franchise quarterback tag is $38 million, correct?
It's up to 41 now, I think, because it's a percentage of the cap, and the cap just keeps going up.
That's right. So it's $41 million, and that's a tough number to move. So if you franchised him and still tried to move him, what are you going to get back? You're not going to get a first round pick back. You're not going to get a second round. You make it a third. So is it worth going through all this just for a third round pick? I would say no. So it's as much as I would like to see them take advantage of the trade chip they have, just the way the financials of the NFL work out, I just don't think it's. I don't think it's prudent, just because of what they would have to go through just to get a third round pick or something. I don't think because I don't think they get second.
They would have.
I'm taking a $40 million. I don't know how much I'm going to want to give up for that.
They would have to get at least a second back to make this worthwhile, because if you let him go in free agency, you're probably going to get a third round compensatory pick in 2026 back for him. So the question is, what the thing that I'm sure they're doing right now at the Combine is trying to gauge how many teams are interested and what would they potentially give back in a trade. And if it works out where they think they can get more and they are reasonably assured that it's not going to fall apart and they're going to be sitting there with the $41 million quarterback bill. Not that that's the worst thing in the world to have him, but it would change all of their other offseason plans. I think they want to move on from him. I don't think they want to keep him on the tag. I don't think that's what it is. It's a question of tag and trade or not tag and trade.
Could they sign up for a little bit less? Would he take $30 million a year to facilitate a trade or something like that? Here's the other thing too. Let me ask you this.
Yeah.
If J.J. McCarthy did not exist, how would you feel about bringing Darnold back?
I'd feel much different. That's yes. The thing. Like they very rarely have been in this situation where they actually have a legitimate succession plan in place, and this is what makes his potential suitors that much more interesting. Like a lot of the teams they're talking about that could sign Darnold or trade for Darnold don't have that plan in place, and this is not a particularly good quarterback draft. So that's the other piece of this that helps the Vikings in that, if you went into this situation last year, which they kind of did with Cousins, but they weren't trading Cousins. They were deciding what to do with Cousins. If you went into this last year where there were like 5 or 6 first-round quarterbacks sitting out there and a team could potentially draft one instead of having to sign one, that's different. But his market is huge this year because of his year last year and because there's no surefire thing. Like what Shadur Sanders, Cam Ward, like those guys wouldn't even be in the top 5 most years, but they might go there this year just because there's nobody else.
If you were the Raiders and you had a choice of Aaron Rodgers or Sam Darnold for $40 million in a year, who would you take?
I was just having this thought exercise earlier today, and that's a great question. I don't even think you need to pay. I don't even know what you need to pay Rodgers this season. I think he just wants to play. My question basically was that, like, who do I think is going to have a better year in 2025? Aaron Rodgers, who's going to turn
Aaron Rodgers, not touching him. He's toxic. No,
he is toxic. I'm just saying, like, from a pure quarterbacking standpoint, like, we've only seen one really good year from Sam Darnold. We've seen a Hall of Fame career from Aaron Rodgers. I'm not even convinced that Darnold would have a better year than Rodgers next year in this equation.
It's just a chatter you get with it too, though. Because
yes, I know.
I saw some of it from my Bears this year. The 3 or 4 guys had like weekly podcasts. Right. And a couple of defenders and DJ Moore. And so they're kind of chirping during the week, and I don't think it helps the message that's coming out of the locker room. You're right, and with Aaron Rodgers, you get Pat McAfee as well.
Yeah.
It's so you have to keep that into consideration. I don't know if I just want that. I don't want to say distraction, but it just adds another tentacle to the whole thing that me as a coach, I would not want to have.
No, I agree with that. I remember like a few years ago, I can't remember, it was like Adam Thielen or Cousins had a podcast during the season. Zimmer didn't like it at all. There was like a time when like he said something on the podcast that was taken the wrong way, and Zimmer said something like maybe he should get off the podcast. It was a great moment in Zimmerhood. I agree. I don't think Rodgers is worth any of the distraction that comes with him. I don't think history is going to repeat itself with Rodgers coming here. We've heard nothing of that sort or anything like that. The whole Favre history repeating itself, but the Darnold question is an interesting one. I think it's got to be resolved soon, though. Tuesday is the deadline. If they don't get the answer they're looking for at the combine, I think they just say, Sam, thanks for the memories, thanks for the great year, and we'll take our compensatory pick and move on.
Indeed, I agree with that. I think you're spot on with that, and they will move on. But I'm just saying, I don't think the decision was as slam dunk as it appears to be.
I agree with that. We agreed too much. We're going to get hate mail this week, Lavelle, for all the agreeing we did, but it's what we can do. It's what we do. Sometimes we agree. Appreciate the time as always. Talk to you again next week.
All right. Take care.
Watch your dreams and savings grow with Royal Credit Union's 4.25% annual percentage yield 12-month certificate. Open now at any Royal office or online at rcu.org/certificate saver. Early withdrawal penalties could reduce earnings and principal. APY accurate as of 2/1/25. Insured by NCAA.
Great stuff from Lavelle. I think he'll join me next week from Florida. He'll be down there for spring training. Might be a day later than usual. Might be on Friday show next week to get him a chance to get acclimated down there. But thanks again to Lavelle for his thoughts. The Darnold conversation got me thinking about something that gets a little complex if they do use the franchise tag on him in order to trade Sam Darnold, as Lavelle and I were talking about. It's a little bit of a power play for the Vikings, because if they franchise him, of course, that gives them a little bit more leverage in terms of, hey, he's not just on the open market anymore. They dictate the terms of where he could go. Now, they're going to want to make sure that he is happy with where he is going, happy with the terms that team is going to give him in a contract, because, of course, if you franchise and trade somebody, they can then rip that contract up, give them a long-term deal, things like that. So if they do that, they are going to have the opportunity to dictate those terms, and then they might be able to, work something out ahead of time where it's like, okay, we're keeping him off the open market. He might decide to go. He might have opinions about where he would want to go. His teams 1, 2, and 3, something like that. But if a team wants him badly enough, they would have to then trade the Vikings to have the opportunity to get him instead of just having to outbid everybody else. So Vikings have a little bit more leverage here with the potential to franchise Darnold than I really was considering earlier, because then they can dictate the terms of who is able to come get him. They can kind of set the bidding price instead of just it being a bidding war for money. They can set the bidding price for, do you want him bad enough to give us the pick that we want to sign and trade him? So something I was thinking about there, but they're going to want to finesse this in a way that makes everybody happy. They get something, Darnold gets what he wants, and the other team gets what they want. And I think Darnold can't be lost in this equation because they keep saying, we're going to do right by the player. They tried to do right by Kirk Cousins last year, tried to do right by Sam Darnold this season. And I think that's a big part of the cooler, which is Vikings finished second in the entire NFL in these grades they give out. Players grade their teams. The NFLPA puts out these grades. They were first a few years ago, second last year, second again this year, getting almost straight A's. Players love the atmosphere. They love the facilities, love the game day, love the family environment. Players love playing for the Vikings. And I don't think this is something that you can just kind of dismiss as like, oh, that's nice. Like, yeah, everybody has to play on Sundays. It's all the same on Sundays. It's not the same. If you don't like the culture, if you don't like the atmosphere, if you don't feel like you're valued, there is going to be a difference. With the margins being so small in the league, I think that does make a difference. I think that contributes in some way to their success. Now, obviously, you have to get it done on the field, but this team has overachieved greatly in 2 of the 3 seasons since Kevin O'Connell arrived, when they've been getting these high grades. Even 2023, they were overachieving until injuries just completely ravaged them. So you look at it and you say, I think this does matter. It matters the opposite way, too. The Jets' grades, not great. They were the only team to give ownership an F. Woody Johnson got an F from the Jets. They were a dysfunctional mess this season. They had a lot of talent on paper. It didn't come together. They finished, 5-12, something like that. Lost to the Vikings in London. Aaron Rodgers out. So it does have an impact, is all I'm saying. Don't just dismiss this as some kind of nice feel-good story. Like, this matters. It doesn't matter maybe like every moment of every day, but this overall culture they've built, I think it does contribute to their success, and on the flip side can contribute to a negative vibe like it did with the Jets. That will do it for me today. Like I said earlier in the week, Ben Gessling joins me on Friday's show. More Vikings talk from the Combine. Want to hear everything he's hearing out there. Until then, I'm Michael Rand. Have a great rest of your Thursday. Back at it again tomorrow.